Lila Morgan adjusted the strap of her modest nursing bag as she stepped into the pristine hospital wing reserved for the elite. The gleaming floors and polished glass reflected the soft hum of whispered conversations, punctuated by the occasional clink of silverware and murmurs of visitors dressed in expensive fabrics. She felt a familiar flutter of discomfort. This was a world apart from her usual wards. Her crisp white uniform, freshly pressed but simple, contrasted starkly with the tailored suits and glittering jewelry of the guests. Silently, Lila made her way down the corridor to room 504, where the hospital's most high-profile patient was resting. The air was laced with the faint scent of luxury perfumes. She greeted the patient with gentle professionalism, checking vital signs and offering calm reassurance, careful not to draw attention to herself. The patient's spouse hovered nearby, impeccably dressed, fingers adorned with rings that caught the light. As Lila prepared medication, a sudden commotion erupted outside the room. Voices rose in alarm. The patient's prized diamond watch had gone missing from the dressing table. The spouse's sharp gaze immediately landed on Lila. "You were the only one in the room," they snapped, voice hard and accusing. A hush fell over the corridor as other staff exchanged glances. A nurse whispered doubts, while a visitor smirked audibly. Lila's heart hammered as the accusations grew louder. Her protests were brushed aside. The floor manager approached, nodding solemnly, and without ceremony, Lila was ordered to apologize for the misunderstanding and escorted out of the wing. Walking away with her head bowed, the sting of humiliation burned in her chest. Despite the weight of the accusation, a quiet certainty held steady within her. She had done no wrong. Back in the cramped apartment that Lila Morgan called home, the harsh contrast with the hospital wing was immediately felt. The dim lighting, the worn furniture, and the faint, lingering scent of aged wood greeted her like an old friend. She sat on the edge of a threadbare couch, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady her breath. The false accusation repeated itself in her mind with sharp clarity. Sleep evaded her that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, each tiny sound amplified in the silence. The taste of bitterness settled in her mouth, and even the simplest meal seemed an insurmountable effort. She barely touched the dinner her sister left on the table. Words were scarce. When her sister asked about her day, Lila's voice was barely a whisper, drowned by the overwhelming weight of humiliation. The next morning brought no relief. The image of her supervisor's disappointed eyes haunted her, mingling with the snide comments she imagined swirling in the hospital halls. Her career, honed through years of study and sacrifice, now dangled precariously by a thread. The accusation gnawed at her confidence like relentless waves eroding a sturdy cliff. Memories surfaced unbidden, throwing her into fragments of the past. She saw herself years ago, young and hopeful, walking confidently through the halls of nursing school. There was pride in her stride. She had been a brilliant student, top of her class, praised for both her knowledge and compassion. But life's abrupt turns had spasmed that trajectory. Her mother's illness came suddenly, demanding full attention and care. Lila had set aside her dreams, becoming a constant caregiver to a woman fading away day by day, sacrificing her time, energy, and even finances. Scenes flickered to a time when she had to drop out of school, the weight of responsibility anchoring her firmly away from textbooks and lectures. Her mother's frail hands reaching for hers, a faint smile in spite of pain. The endless hospital visits she made not as a nurse but as a daughter, tracking appointments, administering medicine, offering comfort. When her mother finally passed, the silence that followed was deafening, but Lila pressed on for the sake of her younger sister, who was only 10 then. Her face softened remembering the years spent juggling night shifts, low-paying nursing aide jobs, and part-time classes to regain her certification. How she had been passed over for promotions at cheaper clinics, overlooked because of her quiet demeanor and humble background. Yet, the pride she still held in wearing the official nurse's uniform had never waned. This job at the prestigious hospital was the culmination of relentless effort. Now, with her integrity publicly questioned, those sacrifices felt all the more acute. She had worked so hard simply to hold this position, to prove that someone like her, modest, unassuming, determined, could belong in such a world. The sharp divide between her reality and the hospital's opulence was not just financial, it was a chasm of assumptions and prejudices she confronted daily. But within that bitter mix of memories and pain, another feeling stirred: resilience. Despite the deep ache of rejection, she wasn't ready to crumble. She thought of the countless times she had faced challenges far tougher than this. The quiet hours tending to her mother, the nights spent studying when exhaustion screamed for rest. It was those moments, those sacrifices, that had shaped her steel. Lila also remembered the small kindnesses she had encountered: the security guard who always nodded respectfully as she passed, the cleaning staff who smiled knowing the weight she carried, the one patient who had whispered a heartfelt thank you. These flickers of humanity told her she was not invisible, even in a world that made her feel so. Her sister, younger and wiser than her years, sat beside her now, offering a steady hand. "You're more than what they say," she murmured gently. "You always have been." Lila nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in her throat. This was more than a job, it was a fight for dignity. And she was not about to let one cruel falsehood erase years of honest toil. She forced herself to rise, the memory of her mother's strength warming her resolve. She would find a way to clear her name. Not through confrontation or anger, but by showing the truth in the clarity of facts. In a mirror across the room, the nurse saw not just a woman accused but someone determined. The accusations had stung, but they had not broken her. Tomorrow, she would face the hospital again. For now, she needed rest, if only to gather strength for the battle she knew lay ahead. Days passed in a haze for Lila Morgan, the sting of false accusations still fresh and raw. The silence around her felt suffocating: whispers at work, sideways glances, and the chilling thought that her reputation, built carefully over years, might already be shattered beyond repair. Yet, amid the swirl of doubt and despair, a flicker of clarity arrived. A phrase replayed in her mind: during the commotion of the missing watch, she had overheard a conversation between the patient's spouse and a nurse, a comment about a misplaced item and a hurried excuse that hadn't fit the scenario. The nurse's tone had seemed anxious, more defensive than curious. Something about the timeline didn't add up. The spouse's certainty that only Lila could be responsible felt too easy. The detail gnawed at her, growing impossible to ignore. Determined to find clarity, Lila took a deep breath and picked up her phone. She dialed the front office of the hospital, asking to speak with her former supervisor, a woman named Claudia. When Claudia answered, warm yet formal, Lila hesitated before explaining. "Claudia, I know how serious the situation is with the missing watch, but I can't shake the feeling that something's off. I remember hearing the patient's spouse and a nurse arguing about an item during that time. I'm not accusing anyone, I just want to understand, to help clear this up." Claudia's tone remained professional, but there was a clear boundary. "Lila, I understand your concern. But the investigation has been handled. We have no reason to believe otherwise. You should focus on moving forward." The reply landed like a stone, heavy and discouraging. Feeling the familiar knot of frustration tightening, Lila thanked Claudia and ended the call. The hospital's walls felt impenetrable, its hierarchy safeguarding the influential. But Lila was not ready to bow out. That evening, she returned to the hospital, not as an employee, but as a determined individual seeking truth. With a polite request, she approached the night security guard she knew, a man named Peter, who had always given her a kind nod or smile in the halls. Peter, "Can I speak with you for a moment?" she began quietly. "I know it's after hours, but I need to see if there's any camera footage from the lobby during the time of the watch's disappearance. There's something I think I should show." Peter hesitated, eyeing the empty corridor, then nodded slowly. "If you think it'll help, I can get the footage ready." They settled in a small security office, the walls adorned with monitors flickering feeds from different parts of the hospital. The grainy, black and white footage played back, showing visitors, staff, and movement in the corridor from hours before the incident. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, discreet but unmistakable, Lila's eyes focused on one figure, the nurse who had been in the room around the time the watch went missing. The woman approached the dressing table, ostensibly checking something. Then, glancing over her shoulder as if to ensure no one was watching, she slipped the diamond watch into the pocket of her coat. Lila's breath caught. The moment was brief, but clear. Peter glanced over her shoulder, eyebrows raised. "Well, I'll be. Looks like someone didn't want to be seen." The footage continued, showing the nurse quickly leaving the area, the sparkling watch carefully concealed. For the first time, a sense of vindication warmed Lila's soul. "But what do I do now?" she whispered, the gravity settling in. Peter offered a small but firm nod. "You've got proof. You could start by telling someone official. Maybe the administration or even the patient's family again." Lila shook her head. "I tried, they didn't believe me. I'm just a nurse with no power here." Peter paused. "Then maybe you need another way. Sometimes truth speaks loudest when everyone's watching." The seed of an idea took root. Lila left the hospital that night with the footage saved on a small drive, her steps lighter despite the weight of the task ahead. The camera had told a different story, a story that could restore her name and reveal who truly stole the diamond watch. She knew it wouldn't be easy. The hierarchy and prejudices embedded in that world had already cast her out once. But armed with facts, she was ready to face the challenge, to turn whispers into acknowledgement. Her quiet resolve was rekindled. This was not just about clearing her name. It was about standing tall, proving integrity could exist amid opulence and suspicion. And she would not be silenced. The evening air was crisp as Lila Morgan adjusted the strap of her bag, the small USB drive tucked securely inside. She stood outside the grand conference hall of the hospital, where a gala for the VIP ward's donors and staff was already underway. She had hesitated, torn between fear and determination, but the image of the diamond watch being secretly pocketed pushed her forward. Tonight was her moment, not in a clinic room or under the dim hospital lights, but in the very arena where appearances and whispers had once shrouded her in doubt. The grand hall buzzed with murmurs and clinking glasses. Guests in tailored evening wear floated through the space, some greeting each other with practiced smiles, others watching newcomers warily. The lavish decorations gleamed under chandeliers, every detail spoke of wealth and exclusivity. Among them, Lila moved quietly, drawing little attention but carrying inside a storm of purpose. She made her way toward the event coordinator, a woman named Marissa, who recognized her instantly. Their eyes met with a flicker of surprise. "Ms. Morgan? What brings you here?" Marissa asked, voice tinged with polite curiosity. Lila took a breath, steadying herself. "Marissa, I know this isn't the usual place for my voice, but I have something important, evidence that proves my innocence concerning the missing diamond watch. May I speak to someone about showing this?" Marissa glanced around, uncertainty flickering across her features. "The gala isn't really the place for that," she murmured. "Besides, this is all hospital business." "I understand," Lila said softly but firmly. "But if the truth doesn't come forward here, it might never come out." After a moment, Marissa nodded and led her to the hospital director, Dr. Myers, a stern woman whose expression suggested she'd been unexpectedly pulled away from celebrations. Dr. Myers listened as Lila calmly explained the situation, presenting the USB drive. The director's gaze moved to the screen when the footage began playing, the shadowy black and white images revealing a scene none had seen before. The nurse, previously trusted and shielded by assumptions, moved stealthily, the diamond watch disappearing into a coat pocket with a furtive glance. The crowd watched, intrigued and uneasy, as whispers rippled like a breeze through the gathered audience. The patient's spouse stiffened, eyes darting nervously, their confident posture faltering for the first time. Their lips pressed thin, struggling to find words as the realization settled in. Nearby, the nurse in question turned pale, her earlier arrogance dissolving into panic. She shifted uncomfortably, darting glances, her carefully cultivated calm cracking under the steady weight of undeniable proof. Guests began exchanging looks, expressions moving from polite detachment to surprise and quiet indignation. Judgments that once targeted Lila now circled back, surprise at their own misjudgment mingled with growing support for her. Dr. Myers's voice cut through gently but firmly. Given this evidence, the nurse will be suspended immediately pending further review. The atmosphere shifted palpably. Those who had once dismissed or ridiculed Lila now looked at her with new respect. A few approached quietly, offering nods or whispered words of apology. Her dignity, quiet though unyielding, radiated as she stood still amid the sea of changing opinions. The patient's spouse, gathering their composure, approached her hesitantly. "Ms. Morgan, I owe you an apology," they said, voice low, tinged with regret. "I was wrong to accuse you." Lila met their gaze steadily. "Thank you," she replied simply. "It's important that the truth comes out." People who had once passed her by without notice now paused, voices rising in quiet admiration. The nurse who had been wrongly accused walked away, shoulders slumped, the truth having unveiled what suspicion could not. As the event resumed, the tense energy transformed. Conversations now carried undercurrents of respect for the woman who had stood firm, who had refused to let injustice define her. She wasn't just a background figure anymore. She was someone who had claimed her place with quiet power. Lila found herself approached by a few hospital staff who offered congratulations and smiles previously withheld. Each person who reached out somehow lifted the heavy cloak of humiliation she had carried. In that grand hall, amidst the shimmer of wealth and polished appearances, the simple nurse who had once seemed so out of place was proving she belonged, not because of title or attire, but on the strength of truth and dignity. As the night deepened, Lila felt an unfamiliar warmth, a spark of possibility, igniting within. She was not invisible. Not anymore. The suspended nurse, Cassandra, had never anticipated the evening's unraveling. Her usually confident stride faltered as she gathered her belongings to leave the hospital's prestigious VIP wing. The aftermath of the gala was swift and undeniable. Dr. Myers had acted decisively, her voice firm when announcing Cassandra's suspension and the initiation of disciplinary procedures. Word traveled fast among staff and guests, and the weight of public scrutiny pressed heavily upon Cassandra's shoulders. She avoided eye contact, her facade cracking under the persistent stare of whispered judgments. Meanwhile, Lila Morgan stood quietly in a corner of the gala hall, the pulse of the event flowing around her. Though dressed simply compared to the opulent attendees, there was a new strength in her posture, a gleam of quiet triumph in her eyes. The public apology she'd received from both the hospital director and the patient's spouse resonated deeply within her, words finally restoring the dignity that had been stripped away. Dr. Myers approached her, extending a hand with a genuine smile. "Lila, your professionalism and integrity have been invaluable. We'd like to offer you the position of head nurse for the VIP ward." You deserve this and more. Lila's breath caught, a promotion not only recognizing her competence but also affirming her worth in a world that had so often overlooked her. I'm honored, Lila replied, voice steady but soft. Gratitude mingled with relief. The journey from accusation to acceptance had been long and bruising, but now she stood on firm ground. Throughout the room, conversations shifted. Several influential figures who had witnessed the unfolding events approached Lila, offering quiet congratulations. A well-known philanthropist attending the gala expressed interest in sponsoring further education for dedicated staff like her, hinting at future opportunities beyond the hospital's walls. The patient spouse, no longer guarded but humbled, spoke openly with Lila. Thank you for your grace throughout this ordeal, they said sincerely. You've reminded us all about integrity and fairness. As the evening deepened, Lila slipped outside for a quiet moment beneath the twinkling stars. The cool night air brushed against her face, carrying a sense of calm she'd not felt since the storm began. The hospital's grand building loomed behind her, bright and imposing, but no longer a place that made her feel small or unworthy. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Cassandra, the woman who had tried to hide behind the hospital's prestige but faltered under truth's weight. The path ahead for Cassandra would be difficult, but Lila's own resilience had been forged in hardship and grace. She stepped forward with purpose, confident that her diligence and integrity would guide her future. Returning inside, Lila caught sight of Marissa, the event coordinator who had hesitated yet ultimately allowed the evidence to be shown. Marissa smiled warmly. You handled everything with remarkable calm. You're a credit to nursing. Lila returned the smile, a genuine one this time. Thank you. It means more than you know. By the end of the night, the hall buzzed not just with celebration but with a renewed respect for a woman who, once underestimated, had rewritten her story. Lila Morgan was no longer just the quiet nurse they had judged. She was a symbol of strength beneath simplicity, visible, respected, and undeniably powerful. As the guests gradually dispersed, Lila stepped out once more into the night, her head held high. The journey from accusation to vindication was complete, but more importantly, she had claimed her rightful place. The hospital doors closed behind her, but in her heart, a new chapter was just beginning.